Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book, author of Course of 1,000, now available on Amazon. And today we are talking about The Wizard by Gene Wolfe. This is book 2 of his Wizard Knight duology. This book was great. I'll just get that out of the way right now. This book was great. It was fantastic. For those of you who saw my review of The Knight, the first book in this story, I was positive about it. I was optimistic about it. I was captivated by The Knight. I really was. But I was a little bit befuddled. It was hard to see what the trajectory of the story, where it was going, what it would all amount to. There were the hints of it, I feel like, towards the end of The Knight, with what Abel was able to accomplish, the legacy he was starting to leave behind, with everything with the conflict with Garsek, the dragon, and then with Tug at the end. Tug or Tug. I'm gonna be talking about Tug a lot during this, so I'm gonna call him Tug. And it left off in such a way where it was building towards something. It was starting to get settled onto the tracks of where it was going. It was going somewhere. It was getting settled on that way, but it wasn't clear what that was yet until you get to the Wizard. So people who might have read The Knight and written it off and been like, I don't get it. I don't get where it's going, what it's doing. Probably one of my biggest criticisms of The Knight was the fact that it jumped around so much. It was just kind of almost a lightning speed off to the races of Abel. He's doing this. He has goals in mind. Duke Martyr figures pretty prominently in those goals, but there are so many side quests, if you want to call them that, in that book, and because of its herky-jerky pace, which isn't all that unfamiliar to the worlds and stories of Gene Wolfe, it is certainly disorienting. I can understand why it would turn some readers off if they've read The Knight from getting to the Wizard and completing the story. But I feel like if you've read The Knight and you're not sure, I think you do owe it to yourself to read The Wizard, to then have a chance to step back and really see what the full picture of the story was. And it was a very beautiful one. I think the beauty of which is setting in now for me. I think as it did with the Book of the New Sun, the beauty of that, the weight, the magnitude of that story, it doesn't start to really sink in until you get to the end, which is why, if you hear one thing about Gene Wolfe, it's that complex and puzzling as his works may be, they are rewarded after you have finished them. They are rewarded with rereads, with revisiting it, with thinking about it, pondering it. And that's what the best works of literature do. And Gene Wolfe accomplishes that within this book. So, getting into The Wizard itself, this book is much different than The Knight. First of all, in terms of plotting and pacing. We are in basically one location in this book for a big majority of it. And as I was getting started with this book, I heard that one of the biggest criticisms of The Wizard is that the first half of it, so this mass market paperback is about 600 pages. So for like the first 300, okay, is it going to be slow? Is it going to be off-putting? But one of the big criticisms that I've seen from The Wizard is that not only is it's maybe a little more plodding and slow, but it focuses very heavily on the character of Tug. Tug and Ulfa and Poke, if you want to call Mani and Lord Beale, and those characters, and of Gilling and the Ongborn as they go into this land. I want to make sure I get the name right. It's on the tip of my tongue, just so, again, with so many terms in this book that I can pronounce it correctly. Utgard, Gilling's castle. We spend so much of this book within Utgard, and the interactions between Onthor, King, or it's really Lord Beale and the men of Duke Martyr, Sir Svan. He's now a Sir. He's now a knight. And Tug, and Gilganeor. Wasn't even close with that. Garvon, and character, and of course Eden. Eden, of course, there's got to be somebody named Eden to really dig home the allegory and the Christian allusions within this, of which there are a ton in this book. But we spend a lot of time in that, but I don't think that's a bad thing. For a lot of this book, the narrative kind of shifts back and forth between Abel and Tug, but that is very important for what this book is trying to say, because, minor spoilers for the beginning of this book, Abel comes back from Sky, and he's been in there for like 20 years, but of course the further up in the 7 realms you move, the time passes super slow in comparison to Mythgarther, or kind of the earth of this book, in terms of the surface level land that is populated by people. If you're in Sky, which is, I think, 1 realm above, I'm just making sure I get my geography of this book correct. Yes, it is 1 above Mythgarther. He spends about 20 years in Sky, but not that much time passes on Mythgarther. Whereas, if you are in Elfris, which is 1 step below Mythgarther, you spend a day, a week in Elfris. Years and years can pass in Mythgarther, but you can spend years in Sky. It's kind of like Narnia. You spend years in Narnia, you come back to the real world, maybe an hour or so has passed. So Abel comes back from Sky, and again, like some spoilers here, even though the nature of this is debated from the characters in the book, he's dead. That Abel was killed at the end of the last book, and he's dead. But he says, "No, I'm not dead." And there's some debate as to his deadness as the story gets underway. But he has come back from Sky. He has spent time with this deity known as Valfather. And Abel comes back, and already there is a marked change within his character. He's much, at least to me, it seems he's much more introspective in this. He is much, he's very distant. He is not the rash and almost heedlessly violent character he was in the first book. Not to say that he was brash and violent and flying off the handle the whole time, but he had these type of, almost like pre-teen angsty violent impulses, which makes sense. It makes sense for his character because he is an 11-year-old from, or 11, 12-year-old from our world who is plopped into this existence and finds himself this knight of great physical capability, and he exacts that in violent ways. But he kind of, he gets the sword of Eterna at the end. He defeats the dragon. He goes up to Sky, and he comes down with Cloud, I think he might have had Cloud in the first book. I'm forgetting the details there, but he has this steed called Cloud, and she is this great a flying white horse, almost a Pegasus, but not quite. Um, and we don't stay on Abel for long. A lot of this is spent with Tug, who Tug has these aspirations, but at the same time he's trying to quell them. He wants to be a powerful figure. He has that almost an honorable desire burning within him. But at least at the beginning of this book, he is very much so. He is a squire. Think if I remember correctly, he is Svan's squire. Um, and and Tug he's seeing more of the world. As he is kind of part of Beale and Eden's faction within Utgard. Um, he's seeing a lot of it. He's experiencing the Angborn and King Gilling and all of these intense figures, but there's a great humanity that is revealed within Tug, and great heroism. In particular, when and I'm going to consult the glossary again just to make sure I get the name correct. And he meets Etella, who is a slave girl in Utgard, and he successfully defends her, and so he exhibits great heroism. And at first, it seemed like this was almost. I mean, this book is in many respects almost not necessarily a coming of age, but of Tug, this peasant figure coming into his own, realizing a destiny of honor and heroism. He sees the people like Abel, and now what's interesting, and I'll get into this, so that this will be littered with spoilers. So proceed at your own risk, but of course, maybe these aren't spoilers in terms of thematic spoilers or plot spoilers, because as with any Gene Wolfe novel, I could be way off the mark. This is just what I took from it. But Abel coming back from Sky, and truly, as it's revealed later on, truly being deceased, he is very much so a divine figure. He had tremendous power in the first book, but he has unquestionably divine power now. But he does not want to use it. That's part of the conditions it's revealed at the way end that he makes with the Val Father. He can come back. He has a desire to come back. It's almost like he doesn't know what to do with himself. He has that fixed goal in his mind. At first, he says, I'm going to hold this pass, but his mind is still on Queen Desiri. He still wants her. He still desires her. Desiri, I mean, ultimately at the end of the book, I think when he is able to finally be with her, she is almost, she is death, or she is the release. She is that kind of eternal, Desiri is eternal surrender, but the only way you can get to her is by sacrificing everything else. And at first, Abel, even though he wants her, I don't think he does at first, but he feels this almost like a divine imperative to unite these people. And so when at first it seems like Gilling and the rest of the Angborn are going to sabotage the party of humans and Duke Martyr's men that are coming to ultimately to lead Eden to marry Gilling, and she kind of becomes queen of the Angborn, queen of the Jotunland region. He insists upon it. He insists that they go, and he almost doesn't want to have a big hand in it. But he starts to, as time goes on, and this book, I mean, it's so remarkable in its how it portrays the restraint of divine influence. A figure who, I mean, Abel knows he's divine. He knows he has these powers, but he doesn't really let that on to the reader. He certainly doesn't let that on to the other knights, dignitaries, uh, bold Berthold and Gerda, people like that. He has the power to make the blind see, to heal the sick. He has almost this Christ-like influence, power, zeal about him. But he wants to make sure that everybody is united, everybody is directed. And I mean, it's almost like he views the unborn, the elf, the humans as not necessarily equal creatures on a way towards that can be on a path towards divinity, but there is that in some respect. He is very hesitant on using the God card, and instills that within Tug when it comes to approaching Yuri and Baki and the elf people, because to the elf, the humans, the people that are in Mythgarther are gods. And he restrains himself until the end. It's almost, I mean, I might be wrong in thinking that like Setter almost kind of lets loose one last time at the end with that kind of that dragon that comes over and influences the Black Khan, or the Black Call, the Black Khan at the end. But Abel is adamant in uniting people to a common cause, but uniting and almost inspiring strength. And he does that completely by the end, but he has to pull in that divine influence a little bit, and it costs him. I mean, the wizard and ultimately the story as a whole, it has kind of a tragic end. But then getting back into when it, at the point in this book where and I was almost thinking that there was a clue here, but there might not have been like a clue or a misdirection. It's where Abel and Garavone and Tug and Svan and Vin or Vil, let me just make sure I got the name correct. Vil, the blind slave who might be Atella's father, when they go into Elfris, and there's that scene where they're swimming, and it's like Abel interacts with Killy, who the elf have instilled in him. You have to kill her, you have to kill her, you have to help us kill her. But he's always hesitant, and he essentially does battle with her, but not really. He just yields to her. He's hesitant in that. And then there is kind of that battle on the beach, or I imagined it as a beach. Maybe it wasn't a beach, and that's just what I saw in my mind, where Setter is pissed at Abel, and he transforms into as Garsek, and his form is a dragon, and Abel does not kill him. Abel fights a little bit, I think, but ultimately he hangs back, and it comes at the cost of Garvon's life. But it's the blind man. It's the blind man that ultimately lands the killing blow. It's the blind man who can then see at the end, and it's almost like that action is something that leads him on to a better path. But there are these corrupt elements within that kind of permeate through Mythgar and Elfris, but it's not the elf themselves. They are not innately corrupt. The Unborn even, they're these big hulking giants, but they're not ultimately corrupt. I mean, there are kind of violent factions and violent parts of them, and there's the ambiguity as to who assassinated King Gilling, or who led him to his death. but the people are able to unite. The Ongborn are able to unite. They're not. There's no like evil race of whatever that's wiped out at the end of this, because unfortunately that's in many respects what fantasy devolves into, is just the good guys wiping over a race of bad guys or bad creatures or whatever. And there are of course elements of that. You can't really get away from that in fantasy, but it's a little more nuanced here. I At first, with that Elfris sequence, I was wondering if Wolfe was giving a hint that that fight did not take place in Elfris, because it seemed like when they got back to Mythgarther, no time had passed. And that was a question mark, but I was then wondering, well, what if there's a reason why no time has passed? Maybe this did not take place in Elfris as we were led to believe, but then it seems like it was, because Abel makes this almost offhand remark of what does he say? He says, "Well, there's no fixed rule in how time passes, so you might be in like there's no rhyme or reason, no no empirical way, I guess, of measuring the passage of time in how it relates to Elfris and Mythgarther." So I think that they were in Elfris. They were indeed there, but I was wondering if maybe it didn't, and that was just Gene Wolfe throwing in a question mark as to make you question and be like, well, hold on, wait a minute, no time has passed. But it seems like, no, it was where you thought it was originally, where that fight took place. Stepping back and kind of, again, going to the divine part of this story, there a big part of this, it almost seems to me, to owe from the I mean, almost like the early church. You have, or at least the history of Christianity. You have Abel, who is this figure who starts to unite, starts to build a cause, and he goes off and he does something and he almost sacrifices himself. And to get to kind of unite the past figures, it's not like dying for the sins of Mythgarther, but he was able to kind of have a unifying violent act at the end of the first book, and then comes back and is present as a divine figure, but refuses great intercession, almost like there is no, or the kind of waiting around for the second coming. And even I know within Christian eschatology, there's a lot of debate as to has the second coming actually already happened. There are theologians that debate that. There's like the 70 AD debate. I'm no eschatological or expert or theologian by any means, but I feel like there has to be parallels between the history of the early church, and I know, kind of, if I remember correctly, at the end of the Gospels you have Christ returning, but he doesn't spend that much time on earth before going back again. And this is almost like widening that scope and saying, okay, let's imagine this divine figure, and not to compare Abel to Christ. He's almost more like an Elijah than anything. He's more of a champion of the ultimate divine figure. That there is no Trinity here, at least none that is readily visible to a first time reader. There might be on further passes through this, but I had wondered for a second that there was almost, I thought I caught a biblical parallel to Poke, Paul, Saul. Of course, the story with Paul is that Saul is a persecutor. It's not it's not a one for one parallel. It's mainly that Saul is blinded and becomes Paul, Poke, or Pauk, or whatever you want to call him. He is blinded, but he kind of lies about being blind. He's really kind of just blind in one eye when he becomes a slave of the Ongborn. Uh, so there might have been something there, but I felt a lot of this is legacy. It's the legacy of somebody like Abel, that he's able to instill in others, the legacy that he kind of um, leaves, or the legacy that he leaves behind, the purpose that he instills within the masses of Mythgarther, where he's able to literally rally the banners towards the end with that big river battle at the end. It reminds me of that, the kind of the formation of the early church. I mean, maybe this is an idealized version where everybody almost is able to rally under one banner, but now I just thought of it, maybe there is a tie, a parallel to the splitting of the church, uh, which almost ties into the tragic end of this, where divisions and divisiveness ultimately hold true within Mythgarther, where I think as when Abel is in Elfris at the end with Desiri, let me see if I can see here. But it's the section. It's from literally the last page of the book. I'll read it here. But we are not always children, and sometimes we lie upon our backs in fine green grass to watch the world above, where time runs swift. There we saw martyr knight Wystan and bold Berthold slay Schildstar, and Schildstar, he kind of becomes king, or becomes a big leader of the Youngborn at the end. Soon time will ripen and we will come again. Abel will come again as a champion, but it implies that it's going to be a very, very long time, and he's almost hesitant to return. It's not a gleeful return, and because he ultimately it's almost like Abel damns himself at the end of the book with finally using his divine healing powers. Berthold and Poke are, and Gerda, I think, too, can see again. He heals wounds from the knights and the squires, and he knows he has to retreat. And the Valfather kindly appears and says, "Are you ready to go?" That was the condition. And there was another condition too, almost a Lucifer-esque character. I might be drawing too much into that, or maybe that might have been the Christ figure too. I think that was almost a representation of the character, where there's the scene where Abel and the Lord or Herald guy, I forget his name, but they go to kind of the bottom of the last world, and there's kind of like Ted Chiang, Tower of Babylon, that the bottom actually connects to the top, and the Lord of the bottom is the Lord of the top. There's an under, or maybe it's a kind of divine figure that's below this one, but the figure that essentially is able to grant wishes for Abel, and he grants, we need food. The troops need food. We need more troops. We need a lot of this. And then there is essentially the "you will deny me 3 times before the cock crows" moment from the Gospels, where this figure tells Abel that you can have this, but you have to. It's almost he's being tested. You have to deny the Valfather 3 times, and of course, 3 times. That one was such an obvious parallel to the Jesus Peter. So, does that make Abel Peter? Is Abel ultimately the disciple in all of this? He is the disciple, and the rest are the further disciples. They might not have the direct parallel. So I know I get that Wolfe, as a Catholic writer, is going to plant those seeds in the story. He's going to explore these Christ-like figures like Severian and like Abel in the Wizard Knight. But that he is trying to explore something else, or to find new and interesting ways of telling those kinds of allegorical stories, and he definitely achieves that within the Wizard here. Um, I think that this improved upon the Night in so many ways, um, and yeah, it leaves off on that tragic type of ending where, I mean, it's the bittersweet ending of Abel having to return to Elfris, but he's happy there, but he knows that there will come a time, and he just has to see time pass above him. He's almost damned in that whenever the time comes when he says that Michael will call on him. So Michael, I mean, there's again another biblical allusion, a very obvious one, to the archangel Michael. He will return, but everybody that he had formed those bonds with will have passed away. So there is tragedy within that, I think. But this it it very much proves, I think, that the Night, as I mean, similar to, you could argue, the Book of the New Sun, where that's really just, yes, it is 4 books, but it is one 1,000-page story. And the same can be said for the Wizard Knight. Yes, the Night was the first part. Yes, it is technically a work of its own from beginning to end, but it is set up. It is set up for how the themes in the story are ultimately explored within the Wizard. It is the fast, herky-jerky pace that is the setup for the payoff within this. And that payoff is so evident, I think. This is a great, great book. And I'm very curious, for those of you who have read this, if there are ancillary resources that you would recommend I check out that can maybe deepen my understanding of this, whether it be podcasts or articles or essays or whatever that exists online. I'd be willing to check it out, and like the Book of the New Sun, I will certainly be rereading this someday. Kind of am probably going through it slower, taking more notes, and so on and so forth, as Gene Wolfe says. So the Wizard Knight gets a hearty recommendation from me. It might even be better than Book of the New Sun, and at least in an emotional way. It's more accessible, certainly. I get that just because it's more accessible doesn't mean it's better. But my appreciation and perhaps my love for Gene Wolfe's writing and his storytelling abilities is deepening after this. And I can't wait to I mean, the great thing with Gene Wolfe is that he wrote like 20 or 30 novels. So there is so much more out there that I haven't explored from him that I can't wait to. So, The Wizard Knight, in this case, The Wizard. If you have read it, let me know what you think. And as always, I will see you guys next time.